Greetings, students. Okay, high school language arts. I know you're excited. Yay. Okay, seriously, I do love to read. I love to teach and I love to write. I am an author. I've written two novels, working on my third. I've written two poetry books. I've written some nonfiction books. So that's a big part of who I am. So, therefore, I love to teach literature. I hope that this is an exciting course for you. I try to make it exciting. I know some things you're like, what? I don't like that author. And that's okay. There's thousands of different authors in the world because there are thousands of different readers who have different preferences. But I try to pick out some that just kind of expose you to literature of different time periods, give you something to think about, just give you a different perspective. That's what literature does. When we read, we get a different perspective. What I hope for this class is that you interact through with me through the classroom posts. I hope you share what I ask you to write and uh, ask questions. If I say something, if you want to challenge me about something, say, "Are you sure this is right?" Ask me. Or it says, "This made me think of this author. Let me share this author with you." Post it. I'd love to get to know you through the classroom posts. This is a flex class, so there's no live meetings. So we don't have that opportunity, but we can really interact. So use the classroom. Lesson one, American literature, the early years. Here's one of the things that in academic courses, when we talk about American literature, schools interpret this as literature produced by citizens or inhabitants of the United States of America. We usually have British literature classes and American literature classes. And they usually start the timeline with the formation of the colonies. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, we have to have a beginning and an end for whatever we study for a particular class. So that's kind of been how historically we've broken it down. I want to expand this a bit and start with some suggested readings from the people who originally inhabited the lands of the United States. Now, these are writings you should be able to find online or in literature books within a collection of writing. You might have some literature books that you've studied in the past that might have these in there. I've got the titles here for you. I've got the tribes there for you where you can see which people wrote this. These are some great examples of diversity of literature that was passed on orally, but we also have it in written form from people who were original inhabitants of the land that we now call the United States. So look these up. I'm not necessarily going to lecture on them. I just want to give you the challenge. Look them up. If you want them, send me feedback on what you think about them when you read them. But it'll just give you a different perspective. I don't want to start with just the colonies because the colonies are not the beginning of the Americas. I mean, you know, pause this whenever you need to. Seriously, this video is meant to be paused, take notes, come back to it if you need to. You can, you know, make a reference of what time slot this was, what time marker this was on in the video, and come back to it. There's all different ways to use this video. You don't have to use this video as just sit here and listen to it. Pause it, look these up, take notes, come back to it. Okay, I also want to give you a little comparative literature. Here's somebody else that you can read. Read the experiences of Spanish explorer. Now, I do my best with names. If you know that I mispronounce something, names are so important. So I take that seriously. If I mispronounce it, please, throughout any of these videos, let me know. But I believe, as if I've looked it up correctly, Cabeza de Vaca, who traveled through what is now Texas as he tried to reach settlements in what is now Mexico City. In A Journey Through Texas, he writes of his interactions with Native Americans. He learned to appreciate the lands and the people he encountered along his journey. He was open to learning about the area and the culture of the people and wrote how he changed because of this journey. So that's one of the reasons that I like to read from a different perspective, is because when he went into a new area, he tried to let go of his preconceived ideas of what he was going to find and experience what was really there rather than what he thought was going to be there. So take that attitude when you read from a different perspective. Try to drop any preconceived ideas you have about what it's going to be like and just experience the literature for what it is. Okay, now, what about then the people where American literature courses traditionally start? We do also want to explore some of these writings. These are early European Americans. These are people who did travel and become across the ocean and become what we consider the colonists. Remember that they're writing in the vocabulary and the language of the times with all of these that I have mentioned here. So the wording will be a little bit different. The thoughts may be a little bit different. They all reflect different perspectives of people who came over. Now, remember that embedded in this is their cultural and religious beliefs of early European settlers. There was quite a diversity. A lot of times we think there's one group of people who came over from Europe with one intention, and that's actually not correct. The settlers were a very diverse group. So there's no one piece of literature that captures all of the beliefs of the early explorers or settlers. But read through this and know that these represent some of the voices. So don't, like Jonathan Edwards, this is a very religious piece. I put it in there because it is one of the perspectives of someone who came across the ocean to settle these lands. Remember that it's not the only perspective. So, but I do want you to read uh, and experience some of the people who came for religious purpose or religious belief that led them or desire for religious freedom. So, there are some perspectives here that represent a lot of different voices. There are lots of others you could find, but these are some of the early European Americans who came over. General History of Virginia by John Smith, of Plymouth Plan. Whoop, I've got a typo. Look at that. That'll drive me crazy if I don't fix it. Of Plymouth Plantation by William Bradford. To My Dear and Loving Husband by Anne Bradstreet. And Sinners in the Hand of an Angry God by Jonathan Edwards. So explore some of this. Find these. You can usually find them online. These early works, there is no copyright anymore. So you can generally search for these early works and find them free of charge on a variety of websites. Because again, copyright no longer exists on any of these early writings. So that's why we can show these here and list them here for you to just find on your own. You don't have to go buy a book that has these in them. But part of why we explore literature is to also understand history a little bit more. So if you're taking an American history class, a lot of what I talk about will go along with the different time periods as we go through these 12 weeks together. Okay, today though, who am I going to focus on? Phyllis, and there are two different spellings of her name, Wheatley Peters. Her writing 1753 to 1784. She was an American poet who died at the age of 31 after using her voice to try to end slavery. This is a drawing that I share over here of representation of Phyllis Wheatley Peters. So, who is this person? She was the first African American and second American woman after Anne Bradstreet to publish a book of poems. Notice I put Anne Bradstreet on that original list of European Americans you can read. Phyllis Wheatley was born in Gambia, Africa, and brought to America by slave traders in 1761. So she was taken forcefully from her homelands and brought to this country to serve as a slave. She was enslaved by uh, the colonists. Her first name, Phyllis, was derived from the ship that brought her to America. It was called the Phyllis. She was sold to the Wheatley family in Boston and took their last name, which was a common practice. Now, the Wheatley family did educate Phyllis, and within 16 months in America, she could read the Bible, Greek and Latin classics, and British literature. She also studied astronomy and geography. She studied poets such as Alexander Pope and Thomas Gray. She also studied her African heritage and wrote with a sense of pride about who she was. Now, don't let this fool you into thinking that she had a wonderful life. She was still enslaved by the Wheatley family. They did choose to educate her, but she still, at this point, did not have her freedom, and she still was not allowed to move about the country where she wanted to, choose her own career, choose her own path. Her path was chosen for her. So I don't want this to make it sound like that she had a glorious life, because there's nothing glorious about being enslaved. It just so happens that she was enslaved by a family who did choose to educate her. Look at what was going on in the world around the same time. 1755, if you're studying history, Samuel Johnson begins publishing a dictionary of the English language. 1763, world geography is changing. The Peace of Paris ends the 7 Years' War. France loses Canada, Senegal, and the West Indies to England, and also cedes Louisiana to Spain. Mozart, at the age of 8 in 1764, writes his first symphony. So I'm just trying to put Phyllis Wheatley in a little bit of context where you know what else is going on in the world. And in 1775, she witnessed the start of the American Revolutionary War and saw America become a nation. Here's some other things going on in the same time period that she lived. Composer Ludwig van Beethoven is born. Encyclopedia Britannica is published for the first time ever, first set of encyclopedias. Ah, look, 1780. Look what we didn't have before 1780, a screwdriver and a fountain pen. And 1783, the French launched the first steam-powered vessel. So these are all of the changes that she saw during her lifetime. Here's a picture representing her first book. It does, if you notice, declare that she is still a servant. That's basically a nicer way to say she was a slave. She was still under the control of John Wheatley of Boston. So we don't want to forget that fact. But she started writing poetry at age 14. Wheatley traveled to London with the Wheatley's son to publish her first collection of poems. Poems on various subjects, religious and moral. It's the first book written by a Black woman in the United States. So that's why I choose to talk about this person, because if you look at Black writers now, this is the foundation. This is somebody who said, I can do this and did this. Now, again, look, she still doesn't have the freedom to travel on her own because she was Black. She could not just go and publish the book without the permission of the Wheatley family. So she had to travel with the Wheatley's son. The book included a foreword, which was signed by John Hancock. Yes, look up in history if you don't remember who that is, and other Boston notables, as well as a portrait of Wheatley. So she was recognized for her talent in the inner circle that became the political leaders of the time, the social leaders of the time. So she was very well known. She was emancipated shortly after the publication of her book. So they did grant her her freedom when after the book was written. I'm going to show you one of her poems, A Hymn to the Evening. Now remember that this is written in the late 1700s. Vocabulary is going to be a little bit different. And remember that she was educated by a Boston family. So a lot of her beliefs reflect their beliefs because they're the ones who taught her to read, and they taught her using books that they chose for their family. So, not all of this, even though some of her later poetry does reflect her pride in her African heritage, some of these also reflect what she was taught by the European Americans. Regardless, though, she does exhibit a very strong talent for poetry. Her words have something that make us think. So here's her A Hymn to the Evening. Soon as the sun forsook the eastern main, the pealing thunder shook the heavenly plain. Majestic grandeur from the zephyr's wing exhales the incense of the blooming spring. Soft purl the streams, the birds renew their notes, and through the air their mingled music floats. Through all the heavens, what beauteous dyes are spread, but the west glories in the deepest red. So may our breasts with every virtue glow, the living temples of our God below, filled with the praise of him who gives the light and draws the sable curtains of the night. Let placid slumber soothe each weary mind, at morn to wake more heavenly, more refined. So shall the labors of the day begin, more pure, more guarded from the snares of sin. Night's leaden scepter seals my drowsy eyes, then cease my song till fair aurora rise. Now, she does have a rhyme pattern, A, B, B. The first two lines rhyme, then the next two, then the next two. So, and that was rhyming patterns were pretty typical in that time. That was in the literary world, how many poets wrote. She has a lot of nature imagery in this. It talks about, awakening refreshed, to talking about um, the personal change of what happens at night, also, that our bodies need that rest, connects us to the natural world. So there's a lot of great things that I like about this poem. Okay. Oh, one more thing before I go. Poetryfoundation.org. I'm not necessarily going to go here, but I wanted you to, if you choose, poetryfoundation.org, go to that, and thousands of poets have their work on there, and they can be read free. The poets that are living today have chosen which ones they want to make available to the public. The older poets, where the copyright has gone off, you can find lots of their poetry. So you just go and just search for Phyllis Wheatley Peters, and you'll find her poetry. If you'd like to read more, explore these people that I introduce you to. Okay, grammar review for the day. Whoops. Sentence structures. We're going to talk about sentence structures because when you write academic papers or creative writing projects, you need to use a variety of sentence lengths and sentence structures in your work. So when we start in first grade, we have a lot of short sentences. This is a dog. The dog is tired. The dog naps. The dog wakes up. We're learning capitalization, put periods at the end. We're learning to read words that we can sound out. So we start our literary careers with very short, plain sentences. As we get older, though, we realize you would not read a book nowadays if it was written like that. It would be incredibly boring. We need sentences of varying lengths to make the work more exciting for the reader. So let's talk about simple sentences. What is a simple sentence? One independent clause It can have a compound subject or verb. For example, the dog barked at the squirrel. Dog is the subject, barked is the verb. Simple sentence, period at the end. The dog and the cat chased the bird. Dog, cat are the subjects, chased is the verb. The dog chased the bird and tried to jump up the tree to reach it. It has two verbs there. Dog is the subject, chased and tried are the verbs. Let's look at next one. Compound sentences. Okay. Pause this video at any point where you need to think about what I'm saying. Okay, I know I'm going through a lot of material. Pause it. Think about it, reread it, totally okay. Go back and reread over those examples that I just gave. I'm gonna move on to compound sentences. At least two independent clauses. So what's a clause? Anything that has a subject and a verb. Independent means it stands alone. It put a period at the end, you're done. I built a boat, period. That's an independent clause. Let's look at this. First sentence. The student wanted to be named valedictorian of his class. You could put a period there. That's a complete sentence. So with this next one, he made a B in his last math course. That's a sentence. We're putting them together with a conjunction. We're putting two sentences together with one. That makes a compound sentence. What about complex sentences? They have an independent clause, a sentence that you could put a period at the end of and call it done, and at least one dependent clause. What is a dependent clause? When I built a boat. Remember, I built a boat was an independent clause. I built a boat, period. When I put the word when in front of it, it needs something after it to complete the thought. When I built a boat, you can't put a period there. It needs something else. So when I built a boat, comma, I lived in Hawaii. When I built a boat, comma, I showed it to my grandmother. So here's the dependent clause. When the ice storm hit Memphis in 1994. Here's the independent clause. Many people were without power for a week. Put them together, we have a complex sentence. Now, it's not so important that you remember what these are called, unless you studying for the ACT, something like that. You need to remember this. What's important is that you recognize the different parts of the sentence and think about how you build your sentences. We're going to talk about how to punctuate these later. But the point I want to make now is not necessarily talk about how you punctuate them with the commas, but how you think about how you write. You don't want every sentence in any paragraph or any short story, anything, to start exactly the same way. I'm an editor. I sent a book back to somebody with lots of edits, and he said those sentences are grammatically correct. Yes, but you started 4 sentences in a row with when, and there was no reason to. When he was running, comma, he dropped his phone. When he dropped his phone, comma, the case cracked. When he was trying to pick it up, comma, the car caught up with him unexpectedly. They had a good plot going on, but it got burdened down with every sentence starting the same. You can break that up. He dropped his phone and bent to pick it up. He then realized that the case was broken. When he was reaching for it, the car caught up to him unexpectedly. Whenever you start any sentences with exactly the same thing, unless there's a literary purpose, unless you're trying to make a point for some dramatic effect, it reads as boring. So Change your sentences sometimes. Put some together to make those conjoined sentences that we talked about here, these compound sentences where you put two together. Put a dependent clause at the beginning of some of them. If you have too many with them at the beginning, move it to the end of the sentence on some of them. But what I'm trying to get you to do is think about your sentence patterns. Compound complex sentences, two independent clauses and one dependent clause. Here's the dependent clause, can't be a sentence by itself. Though Caitlin prefers watching Marvel movies, she saw a DC movie at the drive-in and she really liked it. Two independent clauses, you can put a period after two of those and stop. One dependent clause that needs something to finish the thought. Because he wanted to buy a pickup truck, he took a job at the hardware store. Whoops, undo that. That is, undo, drag and drop. He took a job at the hardware store, but he didn't like the hours they gave him. Now, you don't want a lot of compound complex sentences in a row because then the reader, it becomes a lot of information. So after you have a long sentence like this, put a short sentence like this. Because he wanted to buy a pickup truck, he took a job at the hardware store, but he didn't like the hours they gave him. He quit, period. See how you use different sentence lengths to make stronger paragraphs. Okay, here's a writing challenge if you want. Write one simple sentence like I built a boat. Add one dependent clause. When I was 9, I built a boat. Add another independent clause. When I was 9, I built a boat and I sailed it in the lake. Now we've got a compound complex sentence. Okay, that's what you just wrote. Okay, sentence types. Exclamatory. Shows strong feelings and ends with an exclamation point. I won a medal! Yay! Declarative makes a statement and ends with a period. My dogs are sleeping, period. They really are. I'm really glad they're not barking during this video. I have 3 dogs in my office with me. I'm surprised they're not barking. Interrogative asks a question and ends with a question mark. How many dogs do you have? And an imperative tells someone to do something, and it can end with either a period or an exclamation mark, depending on how you say it. So if I tell my kids to clean their room, I can say, please clean your room, period. If all of a sudden I found out that a visitor is coming and is going to have to go upstairs, the repair person is coming and I've told them 5 times to clean the room already and they're still not clean, and the person is coming that needs to get to the plugs in the room, I might put an exclamation mark. Please clean your room! Exclamation mark. So the same words in an imperative can either get a period or an exclamation mark depending on how they are said. Now, I'm going to make a separate post. I think I'm posting this on day 3. This is going to be on here, but I want to kind of go over it. This will pop up as a separate post, either on day 2 or day 3. But I want to go over it a little bit. Topic sentence. You're going to write a book review on any book that you've ever read. Any book. Okay, truly, I'm open to all different types of literature. It could be a James Patterson book. It could be a more serious book like The Giver. It could be Harry Potter books, Star Wars books, Percy Jackson books, just whatever type of book you like to read. It could be a nonfiction book. Anytime you write a paragraph for an academic paper, it has to have a topic sentence. Every paragraph has to have a topic sentence. Drill that in your head. Every paragraph has to have a topic sentence. The reader wants to know what information is going to be in that paragraph. So if I'm talking about, they need to know whether I'm talking about elephants or bears. If I'm talking about animals, they don't want to have to guess what animal I'm talking about in an academic paper. For this book review, this is an outline that you're going to follow. Topic sentence must include the title and author of the book and the genre of the book. What type of book is it? Then you move into a descriptive of the book. One descriptive sentence about the story or book with adjectives. Think of the back of book covers that give a one sentence description. This is an exciting book that I couldn't put down. Or this is a well thought through book that covers several years of early Egyptian history. Or this is an adventurous book that includes a mysterious ending. Whatever, depending on the book that you read. Okay, now here's what you need to really pay attention to. When teachers give you page counts or word counts or sentence counts, you need to stick to them. If they say write a page, they mean a page. They don't mean a page and a half or 3/4 of a page. Here I'm getting you sentence counts. Summary or overview of the plot and characters. 5 to 6 sentences for most books, 3 to 4 for shorter comic books or short stories. This is an overview of the plot. When you were in first grade and you wrote a book review, you had to write every single thing that happened to prove that you read the book, every plot detail, what they had for dinner, who all the characters were. This is an overview. This is a book review. We just want an overview of what happened. Then you move into your opinion. Do you like the story? Why or why not? Be specific. I'm going to put that here. Be specific. Don't just say, this was a great book. I really enjoyed it. It was wonderful. Well, no. This was a great book because the characters were well developed and the setting was fun to explore. I enjoyed the adventures throughout the book, and I also learned about football while I was reading it, or Egyptian history while I was reading it. Be very specific. Does that make sense? When you're writing academic papers, we want to avoid sentences that are just fluff sentences. It was great. That doesn't mean anything. That could mean everything and nothing all at once. It was great because. And then conclusion, who would like to read this book? What ages? Don't say my cousin. I mean people in general. So do you need to like football to read it? Is it a lot of Egyptian history in it and you need some mythology in it? And so people who like mythology, Greek mythology, would really like this book, especially if they are over the age of 8 or over the age of 12 or over the age of 16, whatever you think. Remember that you can put questions in. I'm going to stop sharing here. Okay. Remember that I'm going to post this book review as a separate report. You don't have to keep this. It's going to be a post on either day 2 or day 3. Can't remember which one right off the top of my head. But so it'll pop up in the classroom as a post. Ask questions if you are like, what? I don't remember what she said. Ask me. Okay. And I think that's it for this first video. Okay, go back over it if you need to. Look at sections of it again. I'm going to post some different things through the week. So kind of take my suggestions of what to read. I'm not going to read, I read that poem, but I'm not going to read these books to you. If you really want to explore, look up some of the works. And later, when I recommend whole books, check them out for your library. Listen to it as an audiobook. Whatever your style is, there's more than one way to explore literature. So really get into this class if you like literature. If you're taking this along with American history class, this will really enhance your sense of history when you read literature along with it. So I hope that you enjoy this. If there's something that you want me to add, ask me, tell me. Like, don't wait to the end of class and say, well, I really wish you had done this. Tell me in the classroom because I can probably incorporate different things into this class if there's something that you're really interested in. Like, I'm a lifelong learner. So if there's somebody that you want me to look up and answer questions about and I don't know, I'm willing to go explore and see what it is and try to find answers for you. So I hope that I meet you through some of your post in the classroom. I hope you enjoy the lecture. Again, I like literature and I like writing, so I like exploring this topic. So I hope that I make it somewhat exciting. If it's not your favorite thing, I hope you learn something then. The subject I struggled with the most. I'm a writer, I deal with words. So math classes were so hard for me. I passed, I did okay, but I had to have extra help. I had to have tutors sometimes. I had to work really hard. So if literature is that type of subject for you, that's okay. Just go with it, just explore, be willing to take the challenges. You're going to have to write in life no matter what field you go into. So take my writing challenges and talk to me in class, ask me questions about how you can improve, ask me questions about different people. If you look up American literature, read one of these, have a question about something you read, want to discuss one of the suggested readings in depth, put the questions in the classroom, okay? All right. I will post again soon.